We negotiated very hard, but they came around.
A strike is averted at SMDC. The hospital has an agreement with its nurses.
Live from the WDIO broadcast studios, this is Eyewitness News at 5 on WDIO WIRT.
Good afternoon. I'm Sandy Dragg. After a marathon 28-hour bargaining session, nurses at SMDC have tentatively agreed to a new contract. Nurses say the agreement means the one-day strike will likely be averted. Reporter Katie Roosh spoke with the nurses union this afternoon. Katie, did the SMDC nurses get what they wanted?
Sandy, SMDC nurses say the contract includes everything they've been fighting for. If the contract is ratified, nurses will have a stronger say on staffing levels. Nurses authorized a one-day strike when they voted down their contract 3 weeks ago. But today, SMDC finally offered the nurses contract language they can agree with, giving them more control over what they call unsafe staffing situations. Nurses would now have the authority to temporarily close a unit to new patients. Nurses say the new contract is not only a victory for the nurses, but also for its Northland patients.
Eventually, as staffing improves and we get to the point that the care will be better and the patients will be more adequately and safely cared for.
SMDC says they are pleased the strike has likely been averted. They say the contract works financially with the hospital group, and they look forward to a resounding vote to ratify it this week. Although union leaders are recommending the contract, some 900 SMDC nurses still have to vote to ratify it, but the union says there's no reason the rank and file shouldn't approve the new contract. Nurses will vote to ratify the contract Friday at the Copper Top Church, Sandy, and we'll have more information on this tentative agreement tonight at 6.
28 hours. It's unbelievable. What time did they start yesterday?
10 a.m.
10 a.m. overnight. All right. Well, thank you. Meanwhile, nurses from St. Luke's are voting to approve their contract today. Registered nurses started casting their ballots early this morning. The contract was recommended by union leaders last week after they and the hospital came to the agreement. The contract, much like SMDC's, gives St. Luke's nurses control over staffing levels. If it is ratified tonight, it will take effect immediately. We'll have the results from that vote coming up tonight at 10.
From the Northlands News Center, this is the KBJR 6 and Range 11 News at 6.
Good evening. I'm Barbara Riles. Michelle Lee has the night off. Well, it's looking likely that there will be no strike for Duluth nurses after all. After months of failed negotiations, Duluth nurses at both SMDC and St. Luke's finally have a contract with which union leadership is happy. SMDC nurses reached a tentative agreement this afternoon, and Buajang joins us live with tonight's top story at 6. Well, Bua, did the unions get what they wanted?
Well, Barbara, nurses at St. Luke's and SMDC say that they're both very pleased at the offers that are on the table. In fact, both unions are encouraging their members to vote yes and to ratify these contracts. It took marathon sessions at both hospitals to reach an agreement. After nearly 30 straight hours of bargaining, nurses at SMDC reached a tentative agreement with management today, avoiding a one-day strike that was scheduled for next week. It took St. Luke's nearly 17 hours of mediated talks last week to reach their agreement. The union says they were able to get contract language that would allow nurses to temporarily close a unit if they feel they cannot provide safe patient care. The contract also includes wage increases. Nurses say it was a hard-fought battle, but one worth fighting.
It's pretty sweet, if you want to know the truth. After all this work and all the effort and all the time that we've put into it, to get a contract that's as good as this one, it feels very satisfying.
Voting for St. Luke's nurses goes until 8 o'clock tonight, and St. Mary's SMDC nurses will vote on their contract on Friday.
Well, Boo, it looked like a pretty good turnout from St. Luke's nurses today. Any idea how that voting is going so far?
Well, so far the nurses that have been coming in have all had a very positive attitude, so that should give us a little insight into what's going on. We'll have the final vote for everyone tonight.
All right, thanks, Bua. Buajang reporting on Duluth nurses.
Right now on Fox 21 News, a strike may be averted after a 30-hour bargaining session between Duluth nurses and SMDC.
Live, local, like no other. This is Fox 21 News at 9.
Good evening to you. I'm Beth Jett.
I'm Nick Lefebvre. For nurses at SMDC, 13 was the lucky number.
Yeah, that's how many bargaining sessions it took for them to reach a tentative contract deal with hospital staff. The development comes after nearly 30 hours of nonstop bargaining and just 5 days before 1,000 nurses had planned to strike. After the noise of July 12th, when nurses at SMDC and St. Luke's joined forces to picket, SMDC nurses were ready to do it again. But then at 1:45 today, they received word of a deal struck with hospital management.
Very happy, very relieved. Basically, nobody wants a strike. Nobody wants to go on strike. Nobody wants to leave their patient's bedside.
Well, I think the magic that brought it together was the overwhelming strike vote that the nurses had.
The Minnesota Nurses Union says SMDC administrators finally agreed to new language in the contract, which allows nurses to close a hospital unit temporarily if there's too much going on to safely admit another patient. Nurses have more to say now about nurse-to-patient ratios and can call in a mediator to decide if managers are overloading them. And the new 3-year contract gives them pay raises, which equals out to more money than their counterparts at St. Luke's get.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Although those nurses got some new benefits added to their health insurance.
The organization is relieved. We negotiated in good faith. Both teams, I think, worked very hard and reached an agreement that reflects our joint commitment to patient care.
The nurses insist that was their underlying motivator all along, patient care.
People can change so quickly and rapidly that we have to be able to assess them appropriately. And if we don't have enough time to do that, then people can have dire consequences for not being observed as often as they should.
So the next step is to seal the deal with a vote on Friday. Members have from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. to vote at the Coppertop Church on East Skyline Parkway. And speaking of voting, that's just what nurses from St. Luke's Hospital did all day today, voting 96% to ratify their new contract deal. Members voted at United Baptist Church on 1st Street East today to approve the deal struck with their administration last week, and that clears the way for change. She says, the staff says nurses for years have talked to each other about the need for change in staffing and finally decided to come together as a force and make it happen.
Up next on Eyewitness News, St. Luke's nurses tonight ratified their contract, while SMDC nurses have reached a tentative agreement.
Live from the WDIO broadcast studios, this is Eyewitness News at 10 on WDIO WIRT.
Good evening, I'm Dennis Anderson. After nearly 3 months of ongoing negotiations, Duluth registered nurses have reached agreements on their contracts, avoiding a one-day strike. Reporter Katie Roosh has the details. Katie, this was a big day for both SMDC and St. Luke's.
That's right, Denny. SMDC union nurses reached a tentative agreement on their contract, and St. Luke's nurses voted to ratify theirs. The union says both contracts give nurses a strong say on staffing levels.
What's this about? Patient care. What's this about? Patient care.
Pickets and negotiations, a vote to strike, and a strike date set. Months of talks and walks have all come down to this. 2 contracts both Duluth hospitals and union nurses can agree on.
Well, I'm fairly tired after 28 hours of negotiating with them and kind of starting yesterday morning and just kind of exhausted from that, but exhilarated at the same time because we really fought hard for this.
After pulling an all-nighter, union leaders announced they reached a tentative agreement with SMDC. Meanwhile, less than a mile away, St. Luke's nurses were voting to ratify their union-recommended contract. Nurses say even though both hospitals negotiated their contracts separately, the fight was a unified effort.
Most nurses just love taking care of patients, and now we feel that we'll be able to do it in a better way.
The language in the 2 contracts is unique, but both agreements give registered nurses the authority to temporarily close units to new patient admissions if they feel the situation is unsafe. This has been the main point of contention in contract talks.
Nurses are caring for more and more patients, so we needed to get to a point where we were going to take that into our hands and try to fix that and get that better for our patients.
For this same reason, Twin Cities nurses fought for similar contract language this spring. Nurses say the new contract is not only a victory for the nurses, but for their Northland patients.
Eventually, as staffing improves and we get to the point that the care will be better and the patients will be more adequately and safely cared for.
Now, nurses at SMDC will still have to vote to ratify their contract before negotiations end completely. But Denny, the union says at this point it's only a formality.
All right. Thank you very much, Katie, for the update.
And a nurses' strike in Duluth averted. SMDC nurses reach a tentative agreement with hospital officials.
This is the KBJR 6 and Range 11 News at 10.
Another victory tonight for nurses in Duluth. Nurses at the St. Luke's Hospital have voted to ratify their contract. Union officials say they had a good turnout at the polls today, saying 96% of the nurses turned out to vote. It took St. Luke's nearly 17 hours of mediated talks last week to reach an agreement. The union says they were able to get contract language that would allow nurses to temporarily close a unit if they feel they can't provide safe patient care. Kate Donovan says today's vote will impact patients the most.
I think the nurses are going to be more aware of what they can do to advocate for patient care. And I think that people will get taken care of better, I think, in the long run.
Meanwhile, SMDC nurses will hit the polls Friday to vote on their new contract. Union nurses and hospital officials were able to reach a tentative agreement this afternoon after nearly 30 hours of talks.